All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for How Border Surveillance Tech Becomes Everywhere Surveillance Tech. My name is Hayley Tsukayama. I'm Associate Director of Legislative Activism at the Frontier Foundation, which is a member-supported digital civil rights nonprofit. My long title means I manage state legislation for BFF, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to run down the row. We have a great panel for you today with lots of folks, so I'm going to let them all introduce themselves.
Hey. Hi, everyone. My name is Xavier Ashe. I am a 30-year hacker. Been in the information security world. I'm Atlanta native, part of EFGA, and a privacy advocate. We're part of several organizations here in Atlanta, the most surveilled city in the U.S., to help fight this technology. And happy that there are so many people here to talk about this, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, Dwayne Goetzel. I'm a lawyer from Austin, Texas. Been involved with the EFF for probably about 10 years, and I'm happy to be here as well. Great to see you all.
My name is Amon, Otis Poston. I help build tools to subvert authoritarian regimes. With a focus on North Korea currently. And this is my first time at the EFF panel. I'm excited to build a relationship and talk to you all about what's going on.
I'm Nash. I work with Hayley at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where I'm the managing director of advocacy. Which means I work closely with our activism teams and our press and investigation team to make sure that we're getting the word out about the ways that your technology and ways that are empowering you about making sure that you can have real control over the technology that you own, as well as the technology that's deployed in your community. So thank you.
Hey y'all, I'm Sarah Phillips. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a campaigner at Fight for the Future. We're a tech justice and digital rights organization that does national campaigns focusing on anti-surveillance and pro free expression work online. I specifically work on abortion surveillance related issues, free expression, and how LGBTQ youth interact with the internet. I'm from and based in Texas, where I came out of abortion access work around youth communities. Nice to be here.
All right, thanks everyone. So just already applause. Just to kick us off, set the table a little bit. Nash, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off and just talk a little bit about when we say surveillance technology, what sort of technologies are we talking?
Sure. So there are a number of different types of surveillance technologies that are being used along the border, along the U.S. border, particularly along the southern border, and many of which have already made their way into our communities. I'm going to use a little bit of a cheat sheet that I have on my computer to kind of go over some of the things, but it's not going to be exhaustive, and because we don't have, I could use the whole hour of going over the different technologies. I won't do that to you. But we do have a border thing. So if folks want to come up if you're interested in like actually seeing some of the technologies that I'll talk about. I can give you a QR code. You can be able to direct you to our border surveillance zine that's available in both English and Spanish. And really, surveillance technology along the border is not something new. As far back as when the U.S. Border Patrol was created in the 30s, they were already putting up unmanned surveillance towers. And in the 90s, they started experimenting with remote cameras to surveil the border, which did not work very well at all. Even as recently as 2024, they recognized that 30% of the cameras were not operable. So we, a few years ago, started a project to kind of map the technology that was being used along the borders called the Atlas of Surveillance, which allows for when some of the ways that we got the information was procurement documents, as well as environmental assessments from CBP that often had images as well as geographic coordinates of where the technology was being deployed and what technology was there. And so some of that includes remote video surveillance systems. One of the primary vendors there is General Dynamics, and those include electric optical lenses, infrared cameras, laser illuminators that have a 5-mile effective range, as well as spotlights with 12 million candle power spotlights. Which are then referred back to remote command centers where then they're being monitored. And we've also seen, like, through identifying where the technology is, it's kind of a myth that it's only in rural and underpopulated areas. A lot of the technology actually is in more populated areas, and as I think we'll probably get into, because of the fact that 100 miles inland of the border is which includes the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, 2/3 of people in the U.S. live in areas that are technically within the border region. There's also integrated fixed towers along the border. Many that were from IBIT Systems, which is a company, the vendor that has already come under fire for some of the technology and surveillance that they were enabling the Palestinian people. And so it's a good way where we can see where surveillance technology being used in conflict areas has been used against along the border and then ultimately within our communities. And those have a reported detection of 7.5 miles effective area. Some of the others, which are relocatable IFTs, so they're now not being able to be moved, but towers are moved, so they're not simply in one fixed area where we can immediately identify them and be easily moved. And there's now also autonomous surveillance towers, which use scans of thermal imaging and radar to identify people, animals, or vehicles, and then to direct cameras to be able to track those items, and then using AI then to try to analyze and assess, what those vehicles, people, animals are doing, and to be able to track them. And a lot of those are also now being placed onto trailers as well as vehicles that allow them to be moved throughout different areas. And again, often we see them being deployed also in tribal areas where the tribal councils have not actually been able to effectively receive notice within a timely manner in which they can push back on that technology being used. And of course, we've heard in the last panel, and we'll hear more about automated license plate readers, which are now widely being used by local police services, not just in the border, but throughout the country. And so again, this is not exhaustive. I could go on, but I'm going to let's move on to some of our other panels. Thanks.
Thanks, Dash. Yeah, so that's like a rundown of some of the things we're talking about. Kind of open to anyone, because you're all here and able to talk about it. Can you talk about sort of the harms of some of this technology and how it's used at the border, and whether and how that use changes as the technology spreads beyond the border?
You're going to start. So, as being part of information security, it's been an interesting and a privacy advocate, has been an interesting journey to be able to see and figure out, some of the same tools that we use to find bad guys are the ones that are now being deployed to use and find people that have only recently had the things that they do become illegal. And so the harms that we're definitely seeing is not only the technology and the capabilities. You heard some of the specs that these technologies have, but for me, it's the data processing on the back end. So AI has been a very fun path for a lot of folks in figuring out, playing with ChatGPT and seeing all sorts of ways that we can use this technology to create things. But the biggest thing for me in AI has been the data processing power, right? The technology is now available that we can be able to take in all this information and process it at scale. So it's just that has been the biggest change in our capabilities over the last couple of years. Is not that cameras have been around everywhere. It's just that it hasn't been technically feasible to take every frame of every camera, run it through a system, and then be able to easily slice and dice that data. That's the technology that's changing.
But I mean, since AI functions perfectly, what do we worry about? Exactly. Yeah. So what do we have to worry about? For me, legally, the issue really comes down to if they can use something against the least of us, it's just a matter of time before it gets used against the rest of us. And using all of this, starting off at the border, is not a real big surprise, because they say you have fewer rights, you have less Fourth Amendment rights and so forth at the border. Well, then you're just going to have mission creep, and that's exactly what's happening right now. Is you have, as you said, using AI to scoop up vast amounts of data, which is going to lead to bias. It's going to lead to profiling. It's going to lead to loss of privacy. It's going to chill rights. I mean, there's no surprise with Black Lives Matter march, for example, they used drones to surveil all of that. Was it just to count the numbers? No, I don't believe so. So it's a real huge problem, and AI is just making it worse.
To that point, to the point on the mission creep, on some level, the mission doesn't even have to creep, because most of these companies are also data brokers. So they're selling data in real time. Like, as they're getting data, they are also selling them. There's a couple of these companies, Andrew, that I know off the top of my head. I think General Dynamics also, but they built these platforms specifically for companies to harvest data, and the companies that they want to harvest this data or purchase it are local police stations, immigration offices, and places like that.
Yeah, I mentioned abortion surveillance. I think this is a good example of when I'm doing work in Texas. One of the things that we talk about often is that there's an intersection of immigration justice and reproductive justice there are many communities that are dealing with both of these things, right? They live on the border and they also are struggling to access reproductive health care and any number of things that are criminalized in Texas. And so I think on the actual border, while 2/3 of the population actually lives on the border, as we've talked about, in the places where you have to drive through a checkpoint, for example, to go to the grocery store, you also have to drive through a checkpoint to see your doctor, to go to school, etc. We're seeing this obviously with immigration rates, how people are being criminalized at these points. And so I always bring the extra layer of this also can happen for abortion access. One of the examples that I bring up is that the last abortion clinic that was in the Valley in Texas was highly surveilled, both by police and also through some of these mechanisms like cameras, etc. And the last panel we were talking about automated license plate readers a lot, and that's because it's one of the ways that these companies are collecting mass amounts of data that the government and police can just tap into whenever they want to without a warrant. This is a loophole that they've got also with data brokers. When companies sell your data, they can access this through data brokers, as already been mentioned. So when it comes to the harms, again, if you're here for the last panel, I'm sorry I brought this up already, but a Texas cop actually used a flock database of these license plates to track a woman who traveled from Texas to receive an abortion in another state and was able to use one of these databases to track her down. And this is something that they want to be able to amass as much information as people, both to deport them, but also to criminalize them for many of these vectors, right? Whether it be reproductive health care, immigration, quote unquote crime. And like as a policing abolitionist, what I want people to remember is that the border can be understood as a suspension of rights, and we all live under that. And so what these tech companies have been able to do is exploit that suspension of rights by actually profiting off of the fact that we don't have them, that they can amass all this information, that the government will buy their contracts, that the police will use their data to arrest and criminalize people. And also what we're starting to see also is that them give suggestions to police, like actually mapping people's behavior. And that's something like even if these companies themselves can criminalize people, that's all new harms, right? But yeah, all of the things that we're seeing about migration can also be applied elsewhere, and we have to understand that them just having this information, being able to surveil us, has harms at many different areas.
Yeah, and then I'll just close out with saying that we know that the law enforcement use of it and the selling of the information and our exchange of information with law enforcement and data brokers, even when it's intentional, is bad enough, right? And the idea that we would lose the anonymity of being able to express, our First Amendment freedoms to attend protests or to associate with people who we choose to, without the idea that it's being documented and cataloged and searchable for perpetuity, right? Putting us into a perpetual lineup. There's also the reality that we always say it's not if a system will be breached, it's when the system will be breached, right? And so, for instance, Perceptus, which is one of the vendors that stores and collects ALPR data for CBP, in 2019, they had a breach, and over 105,000 license plate images, as well as facial recognition images, were released unintentionally, right? And so those folks whose information about when they were moving about, or even their facial recognition, they can, at least when they can change their license plate. If they need to, you can get a new ID if you need to. You can't change your face. So when that biometric data is being collected and then not being maintained and secured in proper ways, and then gets released unintentionally, there's nothing that the people whose information that is can do to mitigate the harm that's caused as a result of it.
So, this came up a lot in the sort of the notes that when we all talked before the panel. I'm glad that a lot of you are naming kind of the companies that are involved in this. We started out by talking about the harms, but can you kind of sketch out for me how they're making the sales pitch to expand beyond the border and kind of what they say are the benefits and how are they managing to convince people to deploy this in their fashion.
Yeah, I'm on the other end of that sales pitch quite often. So yeah, I mean, my day job is to find hackers. I work in the financial space, so people like to steal money from banks. So I try to keep them from doing that, and if they do, we got to go track them down. So that's what I'm saying. It's like there are good reasons to have this data available. It's the abuse of that data that is the scary part. And so, but the sales pitch generally is more available data. When the events happened in January in the Capitol. We got to see the data that was coming from phones as they tracked individual people walking throughout the Capitol. That awareness, it kind of hit the zeitgeist because surveillance, our privacy advocates have been saying, hey, this is possible, this is happening. It was actually being able to be understood by a lot more people, saying, hey, look how easy it is to track individual people. The sales pitch I've gotten on, is like, hey, you run banks. Wouldn't you like to know everybody that comes into your bank and be able to feed that information? And so it's in part of, everybody's got a job to get your job done. Here is technology that will allow you to get that job done better. It's being able to understand the larger economy of it and understanding the interconnectedness of it to be able to see where does this go from being a useful technology that we're going to pay for to something that can be abused.
And I think also there's an even more elemental sales pitch involved, and that is things like that we're seeing in real time. DC, all the crime in DC, we have to send in the National Guard. Well, instead of putting all the boots on the ground, wouldn't it be easier just to put cameras everywhere, have surveillance cameras everywhere? Then you save all that money, and it's just in its elemental basis. Oh, the world is a dangerous place. This will help you be more secure. Well, who can be against that in theory? But the practicality of it is you don't really realize what you're giving up until it's too late, and then you don't get it back. So if you scare enough people, you kind of self-police, and everyone goes along with it because they're so scared.
I think another thing I want to say here is that you also have to think about the types of the type of public safety we're talking about. These things are being employed against BIPOC communities, immigrants, people seeking healthcare. Like, it's not like someone in the last panel, I don't know if you're here, brought up, like, this is not going to help you, like, have a legal case against your landlord, right? Like this, like, surveillance apparatus, right? It's going after people who are doing the everyday crime that, like, marginalized people are implicated for all the time. It's also not perfect. It's being sold as an efficient way to do this, when in actuality, it often ropes people in a way that police weren't able to do before, right? So rather than efficiency, I think we also need to talk about them just like the abuse of it, not the abuse of it, but rather the existence of it being to criminalize people for everyday shit. Like, that's the way that I'm thinking about it, at least.
To underscore that, we did through public records requests from the Oakland Police Department, we were able to collect data on where automated license plate readers were being used in the city of Oakland. And if you overlaid that data, so what one of our colleagues, Dave Moss, did was he did heat mapping of where the ALPR were being used, and then overlaid that with demographic data around like race and income. And I don't think I have to tell anyone what that looked like, right? And so that's even when the technology is being used, unfortunately, in biased ways by the police department, in ways that they're authorized to do. We've also heard, several times where officers, other officials have used the technology not to like pursue crime, but to be able to track romantic partners, exes, the other people, out in ways that are quite concerning. And so we often hear this idea that, like, it will keep us safer. But often when you give up your privacy, you don't get safety in return. That is a false dichotomy. It actually is your privacy, which very frequently is the thing that will keep you safe. And so this idea that we can trade safety for privacy is just a false dichotomy.
So you can't. So North Korea can't purchase things. So there's no sales pitch to them per se. But you can imagine that North Korea is jumping for joy that we collect more information about our citizens because, well, they have a very sophisticated way of getting access to information through third parties who do live in the country and can purchase things. So when you make this data available via data brokers, I can imagine North Korea is very excited to access the data and get more information about people. Because North Korea, their game is, they play a very long game. So they don't go into a system, hack it, and get out. They get to know you. They become your. So as a matter of fact, the Atlanta Blockchain Center as a local business was recently hacked by North Korea this year. And they were hacked by North Korea because somebody became the founder's friend, then became the CTO of the company, and then after years of working with this man, built up backdoors and slowly just started siphoning millions of dollars. And so if you give North Korea access to more of this information, they're just going to, they're going to love it. They're going to use it. And they're going to do what they do.
Oh, super. Well, that's terrifying, but it's also interesting. I mean, a couple of you have mentioned cybersecurity. Can we talk a little bit more about the cybersecurity risks of amassing all this data?
Yeah, so as it's been pointed out a couple times, is as soon as the data is created, it's now accessible by lots of different people, right? So there's the economy of the data and actually selling it, but there's then keeping that data safe. And so every time that we spread that data to other people, we've seen easy ways for any companies that have a share of that data to not configure their applications successfully and have their data exposed. It's a pretty common situation. In fact, when we talk about our biometrics and how it'd be awful because you can't change your fingerprint, can't change your face. China has stolen the U.S. government's biometrics twice. So that as soon as you have a juicy database, you're going to have threat actors like the North Koreans or like the Chinese that will eventually get access to that data. And so it's one of these where knowing what kind of data you're building, right, and all of us in different roles, is that when we have the ability to influence decisions in which companies start to decide, hey, I would like to do X, Y, and Z, and you say, hey, that's creating a big juicy database that could be hacked. Is this something that we want to do as a business? Like, we have the ability to influence those technical decisions by making it obvious to folks that don't understand the interconnectedness of data. And so that's what I hope to do, is to kind of hope you see the understanding of why we need to limit the creation of these databases and these AI models so that they do not get into the wrong.
So who here has social media accounts? Nope, never heard of it. Never heard of it. No. So how many of you have ever actually read, the end user license agreement or the terms and conditions of use? Okay, small handful. Good for you. Now, what can you do about it? Right? It's like, no, I'm going to do without Facebook. I'm going to do without Instagram, all that, because I don't want to click off on all that. Well, to your point, we live in this digital world. And we're all impatient, and I do the same thing. Yeah, whatever. Click, 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 whatever. Giving them free reign to my data for free because of convenience. We really need to start thinking about something more than just our own convenience, because this data is going to get sucked up by bad actors. It is going to get used. They're going to, and they already do, know more about us than we should. So I don't have a solution to this other than stay away from social media and all online platforms, which is really practical. But we need to think about some way to curtail that so that these mega multi-billion-dollar corporations don't just say, here, China, here, North Korea, here, whomever, use it as you see fit, and we're stuck.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, I hate to just make. We're going to get to some empowering things, I hope. But not yet. Because what unfortunately is like this is what's empowering. Privacy is a team sport, right? And so you can make better choices on the things that you click on. But you also have to do that for other people and encourage the people who are in your circles of trust to do the same, because unfortunately, I might decide I'm never going to go on Facebook. I will never have a Facebook account, and with hopes that they will not have my information. Unfortunately, if Hayley has my information in her phone and Sarah has my information in her phone, and they both have the same phone number, maybe they've added a picture that comes up when I call them, they've got my home address, and then they decide, oh, well, I want to see who else is on Facebook that I'm friends with so I can connect with all the people that I know, and they upload their contacts to Facebook. Guess what Facebook now has? They have a bunch of information about me that I never authorized to give them. And why will they hold on to it? They will hold on to it because they said that they don't have my personal information. They were authorized to have Hayley and Sarah's personal information. So now there is conceivably a building of networks of the people who have my phone number that I had no power in deciding whether that was being collected or built or not. And so I say this not to scare folks, but also to remember that when you're making those choices, you're not just making those choices for yourself. You're making those choices for everyone who has entrusted you with their person.
I guess I'll kind of jump off of that a little bit. On the last panel, we were talking about Ring doorbells, and I think this is a great example, right? Of like, my parents had a Ring doorbell that I let the battery go on, and they don't know how to change. Because like, I've been calling it a surveillance doorbell because that's us putting a camera in front of our house that could be subpoenaed if something happened on your street, across the street, at your house. And now Ring has said that they're just going to give that information to the cops, that the cops will have a backdoor to that information. That means that your grandma's house, your parents' house, your friend's house, the house you nanny for, honestly, your neighbor's having it. They're surveilling the front of your house, right? And they're giving cops a backdoor to have 24/7 surveillance to your house. And I think that's a great example, right? That is something that has been sold to us as public safety. That is something that has been sold to us as personal safety. You should always have a camera on your front door, and there's convenience to it. Oh, I know when the package is dropped off. Oh, I know when someone comes home. My godson just has to ring the doorbell and his dad's on the other side, right? Like, there is a convenience aspect to it. There are things that like are additive to our lives, and we also have to say, no, I'm not sacrificing my privacy for that. And that's actually like a hard thing to do. I don't want to discount it. I think like I'm in a privacy space, so like, people are always like, just don't do it. But I actually think that there are drawbacks to not engaging in it, but we just have to like, as a unit, say we're not going to surveil each other. And also, I don't want to surveil anyone who comes to my door. I don't want to surveil whoever's dropping off my packages. I don't want my mail guy to have to be on camera every single time he drops off a package. Like, those are the kinds of things we have to be thinking about. And it's hard, right? Because the apps on our phone are collecting all this data. But I think that's a good example of like, I just don't want to have a Ring doorbell, right? There are like some decisions that we can make that actually have like big impact. And the thing I wanted to say about Ring is that that's like, I think, an example of it's not just the government, it's also like this creep into our lives of facial recognition, of surveillance, of us surveilling each other. Ring doorbells, facial recognition has gone from just police databases to like the MLB. Like, you can skip a ticket at the front of if you go to an MLB game. If I go to an Astros game in Houston, I could skip the line to scan my ticket if I agree to a face scan. Same thing at TSA. If you agree to the face scan, you can just go, instead of opting out, you can just go through. Like, there's like creep, right? I should go to a baseball game and not have my face scanned, right? Like, I feel like that's normal to not want to do. But if there's creep, right? These companies are like, this is profitable. We can sell it because it's efficient. We can say it's public safety. So we'll do it. They'll always do the thing for profit, but it doesn't mean that we actually have to comply with it or do the thing.
What's also profitable is building tools to subvert all this nonsense.
Yeah.
I think so. There's a TikTok ban panel tomorrow, and so the topic of whether or not software is free speech is on the table in America. I think while we have software as free speech, hopefully we perpetually have it as free speech because it is free speech. But while we have it now, we should build tools to subvert all this nonsense. This is nonsense to me.
If I can just jump in and add one thing real quick. Talking about empowering, and Nash, to your point about this is all kind of a participatory sport. You all are what make me optimistic. We're here in a pop culture con. and we have 80 or 90 people in here talking about serious stuff, you all are informed and you will be informed and you can tell others and so forth. That gives me hope. With all of this terrifying stuff, the fact that there are so many people here who want to learn and that all of this is important to them, that really makes me optimistic. So I just wanted to jump in with the empowering point now and say thank you. Because of you, I'm optimistic that together we will somehow get through this sort of thing.
And we can, we know that ring, and they stopped for a while, and then recently said, oh no, we'll give the stuff to police again. And so we know that ring is doing that. So you can look at what are the alternatives, what else is on the market that I can use that is not cooperating in that way, that is not facilitating that information in a way that is not always transparent to the user or to the technical owner of the technology. And so therefore kind of influence the market by making choices that are more privacy protective when we are consumers. There's also just even though they will try to they try to slide it through you do not have to.
Yeah.
Like when you're going through TSA, when you're coming through the border, if you're a U.S. citizen, you do not have to comply with the face recognition scan, right? You can not. Unfortunately, if you're not a citizen, it's way more complicated. But just so that you have that choice, every time I go through TSA, I always say I opt out, and they're actually. Usually, for the domestic TSA, they're actually pretty good about it. They're going about a lot of times coming into the country. The folks who are at that immediate first stop, they'll say, "Oh no, you can't do that." And I'll say, "Yes, I can." And oh no, but it'll take longer. No, it won't. And so you can do this, but they will make it difficult for you to know what are your rights and what are you empowered to do and what you're not allowed to do. So now there's a bunch of people in this room now that know that you do not have to comply if you're a U.S. citizen with the face recognition scans at the airport.
And since, on the topic of community and the fact that you guys are here listening, and giving this lots of energy, is to take this back. I once went to a privacy meetup here in Atlanta. It was a hackerspace, and wanted to see the space and also wanted to hear what people are talking about in privacy. And it was just crazy how the people that showed up, just so many different walks of life, and they just had a paper flyer sitting on a stack, little 5 points, and decided, I care about this, to come out and to random hackerspace and find out how do I, what's this thing about Signal? What do you mean about end-to-end encryption? The things that some of us, if you've been in technology for a while, understand, and it's now our chance to be able to show. It's like, here is real tangible ways that you can help secure yourself, help understand and think about your threat model, right? People showed up and I feel like I need to do digital privacy, but I don't understand why, right? And helping them understand, well, where are you at? Is this, think about women's health. Is it immigration? Is it something that you have a specific concern about? That'll help you, take people down and say, all right, here are some tools, that will help, keep you secure and help dismantle the surveillance. So you can go home and make this a real thing for us.
All right. I'm gonna ask y'all one more question, and then we're gonna move to Q&A. So I saw a couple hands, so if you could just hold on a little longer, but be thinking about questions that you want to ask these people. You've anticipated my last question a little bit, but I love it. So yeah, what steps should people take if they're concerned about these technologies in their community? We've talked about sort of individual steps people can take. I'm also interested in collective actions that people can take, or is there a role for corporate accountability or best practices? So just down the line, sort of what is something that someone can do right now?
Yeah, I think I've kind of said these things a couple of times throughout today's session, but this is something that I've internalized a lot. When the election happened, there's a lot of, I didn't feel like I was safe in my community, and being a cis white guy, this is new for me, right? So I went and I learned from communities that have been dealing with this for a while and figuring out what is it that I can do to help make this world a better place. I know a couple of things about technology, and I can help people, make those decisions, right? So think about what gifts you have, right? Maybe you are, a geek like me and can help people install things and understand the difference. But what everybody wants to sell me a VPN. What does this mean, right? Those conversations are personal. Find the communities where you can sit down with people and know that you're actually interfacing and start building these communities. Because if we try to do this all online, we're just, kind of creating this, hey, we need a global platform to talk about this. No, go down to the local library, right? The local community center. my bridge group, whatever it takes. Start having the conversations with people, and get the word out there.
I think some things that can be done are really simple. One, you can vote. Two, get others to vote. Three, contact your local representative, not in other states. They don't care about you. When you fill out their forms and they ask what zip code you're in, if you're not in their zip code, they don't care. But you write them. And I know this is kind of a bad thought, but you also donate a little bit of money to them. It doesn't have to be a lot. They will listen to you if you live in their zip code and you actually donate to their reelection campaign. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Give a little money, you might actually get listened to more. When enough people pay attention, when enough people show up, we can force change. When 90 million eligible voters stay home, what are we going to do? So that's a simple, easy thing that everyone can do.
You can probably anticipate that I'll say build stuff, because I think that's really important. When I started doing work in the sort of North Korea space, I was under the assumption that like, oh, it's such a sexy topic. There must be thousands of computer scientists like trying to help North Korea, but there's like 6 dudes.
And they're trying.
Yeah, no. I'm like, dude. So, okay, all right, great. So while you may think like, you may have some idea like, ooh, what if I built a mask that makes me invisible to these cameras? No, someone else is probably already building it. Probably not. And you could be the one to build it. And you don't have to have, at least now, you don't have to have such a sophisticated computer science background to do these things. You can watch a couple tutorials, and instead of building a clone of Netflix, just build this really cool project that'll be very useful. It may not be useful today, but the fact that somebody built it at some time will come in handy eventually. And you can be, any of you can be the person that does that.
Yeah, so in addition to voting, like go and participate. Go to your local city council meeting. Go to your local board of supervisors meeting. Ask them. Find out what type of surveillance equipment is being used in our communities. And a lot of times it won't be easy, right? And so you may have to do public records requests. You may have to literally pass them. There are a number of communities that have passed laws that make it so that anytime an agency in their community wants to acquire new surveillance equipment, it has to be made public. They need to put forward policies. It needs to be approved by their city council. It needs to come back every few years to be able to review and say, is it actually doing the thing? We know that lots of the surveillance technology that we use actually don't do the thing that they said they did. And so even if we have concerns about if it worked, a lot of it doesn't even work. So it's just your money being wasted, right? And so find out. And this year there's been one of our colleagues, Sarah Hamid, has been working with communities and with local projects around the country and has supported their work in communities like getting rid of 600 individual units of automated license plate readers in their community. Over a dozen communities around the country have banned the use of face recognition technology in their communities. So like, get out, get active. If there's not a group in your community that's already doing it, start working on one. So yeah, there's lots of things that you can do like locally to stop these things.
Yeah, I feel like my answer is very similar to that. Like police contracts, I mean, we're in Atlanta, like it's already been talked about, the most surveilled city. And also like there's movements here that are fighting against police contracts, fighting back against the cops. And like that is one of the things, like a lot of these things are passed in silence or implemented in silence because people aren't there. There's reactions to them, but they're quiet. They're the same people over and over again. Like us probably. But like, these are things that, one, we should be paying attention to, two, you can take local action for. And also, a lot of city councils, like, they don't see that energy very often if we can harness it and actually push back against these things. One thing I want to mention also with the facial recognition is that it's also a team sport, right? Because we've seen in Texas that municipalities that pass bans against use of facial recognition for cops will just, like, message the city over to see what they grabbed, right? So it is really a thing that we have to be working together across the country to do because these databases are so large and we want to be able to interrupt their ability to criminalize people with these systems. The other random things that I've found also is like everyone in this room probably is a worker in some context. So like if you work at an organization, if you work at a company, if you work at a corporation, if you're a teacher, if you're a social worker, etc. There are like workplace surveillance mechanisms, so many companies that are, embedded in contract. I just talked to a social worker in New York who was like, yeah, they started using this camera system that surveils every single person who wants to like find housing. And it's like, she didn't know what to do about that. But there's kind of tenets of surveillance in all of our lives that we can be pushing back against. I already talked about the Ring doorbell thing, but I just think that it is good practice to think, if I'm in a crisis in 6 months, what do I need to have, right? And in abortion care, we talk about that a lot because you already want your systems in place. You already want to know who you can call. You already want to know whose hand you can hold, but also you want to know who's going to respect your privacy and security in that moment. So I think we talked about Signal kind of offhandedly, but I think everyone should have Signal on their phone. It's end-to-end encrypted, getting your friends on Signal, getting your group chat on Signal. It's hard to do. It's actually really hard to get people to use these tools, but I think it's important in our everyday lives to implement them as much as we can.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we could have spent an hour talking to each of you, but now we're going to open it up to Q&A. So if you have a question, please approach the mic.
I don't know if this is really a question. I can end it. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not sure if this is a question, but I can end it with one. But I think in the self-empowerment of privacy, I work in privacy myself, and I think I heard Dwayne mention how saying, oh, you're scared, let's bring these tools in to help you, is that people are like, oh, there are criminals around. And I think it's so important to recognize that anybody can be a criminal. In the state of Georgia, if you have a traffic ticket, you're a criminal.
Yeah.
And I've had people say, well, I haven't done anything wrong, so I don't care if you're surveilling me, but I saw them smoke a blunt 2 hours earlier. So I think it's so important to remind people about like the criminality aspect and just say, hey, we can all be criminals. I saw you speeding. If you have a Ring doorbell, like you said, I saw you swerving into your parking lot at 2 a.m. If the cops are looking for you, they will take my doorbell information and they will arrest you. So I think that's important. But I think my question would be around the realm of corporate responsibility, is in that when you read a lot of privacy policies, the legal basis section of the privacy policy usually says like, oh, if the cops ask for your information, just give it to them. So I usually advocate to say, hey, don't do that, like make a subpoena. So I'm not sure, I got here late. I don't know if y'all are attorneys, but I wonder if y'all advocate for that as like a form of corporate responsibility.
At least from the corporate pressure side, that's what we say. Like, for example, like again, in the abortion surveillance space, a lot of companies will say like, oh, it's kind of twofold, right? Like I would rather them not collect the data in the first place, but also a lot of them, like you're saying, like should at least say we're not going to give it we'll only give it if there's a subpoena, right? So
When you mentioned Signal, one of the nice things about Signal is they've designed their technology such that they can't comply. Well, they do comply with subpoenas, but the data that the only thing they give is when you signed up, when's the last time that you used it, and I think maybe like the phone number that you signed up. It's like there's no information. So by having companies that have good data retention policies only retain the data that you actually need to be able to provide the service that people are asking for, and don't retain any other data, and then you can't get your users in trouble because you don't have the data to get. There's also things that you can do, as far as working with the local legislators or state level legislators to pass legislation that will make sure that provides protections around the dissemination of your data, right? And so again, so making sure that companies if they are not going to be personally responsible, if your dollars are not enough power to make them do the right and responsible thing, then maybe it may mean that your legislators need to pass laws that are protective of your privacy.
I think Nash, you're kind of touching on what I was going to ask about with like the local element of activism with trying to make things better on a local level if you can, and the like privacy first design is kind of the idea, like having more data than you need is a liability. I was kind of curious, like with the AI regulation, there was argument about local jurisdictions, like states can't pass regulations. Like, are there, do you know if there are like other efforts like related to that, especially around like this border surveillance and like, instances of where local legislation has been successful in like helping make that case, the argument like having more data than you need is a liability?
I was gonna say, I think that one of the ways to as we start thinking about technology is really kind of pointing out, it's like, where is the data, right? And if you're using a service in which that does have that data, then that data can be sold, given, provide, fed into an AI to develop the models on it, right? That if that data exists, then they can use it, and they probably are right now. I mean, because like I said, every company right now is playing with AI, trying to figure out what they can do with their data. So if it exists, they're using it. So then you look at technology choices and try to figure out, hey, here is this communication platform that doesn't have that capability. Your data isn't there to distill. If you're using stuff that is local to your machine, that data doesn't exist. And so being able to help recognize, that there are, very few legal protections, like you point out, that the way that we can then protect ourselves is say, hey, make decisions that does not place the data in the position to be used, abused to begin with.
Quick question. What countries are doing this right by the citizens? GDPR, right?
I mean, it's a good example, but I wouldn't say completely right.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand that
we're
there's a
privacy
difference.
advocates. Nobody's doing it right.
Yeah.
There's a difference between government's access to data versus all this data that is being collected by the private companies that sits outside of it until it's needed by the government. Or it's being sort of anonymized or set aside. Does the European data protection laws offer any insight into how to move our data protection?
Yeah, it does. It's much more from a civil standpoint, less from a government protectability standpoint. It's designed so that companies can't sell your data without your approval, and that there are fines and penalties involved and so forth. However, you still have all kinds of European cities that have surveillance cameras everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it depends on what realm you're talking about.
Has the enforcement of those companies been there or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I think what tends to happen, it's kind of like what I mentioned before about, you scare enough people, it tends to be self-policing. So for example, the GDPR was put into place, and we don't have a central law in the United States similar to that. But what happened? All the companies that do business anywhere else fell into line and adopted policies to be similar to it because they didn't want to risk. It's very, very steep to come to fine. So yeah, it has been effective to kind of force corporate compliance with that. That has been effective.
Right.
It has not prevented the kind of loss of privacy in the public realm that we were talking about. Thank you.
Hi. Hi. So y'all talked a little bit about China and North Korea stealing some of our data. I'm just curious, of what value is our personal data to those foreign regimes, and what is the specific threat there?
That's a great question. And so in that way, it kind of goes into the threat model or thinking, or the actual different people that that are attacking us, and what do they want out of it, right? And it's going to be a lot of different things, right? The Russians have a couple of different initiatives and goals in mind, right? Chinese have different, and that is part of in the information security world, we kind of divide that up, and sometimes we create cute names for the threat actors and say, all right, here's what what their types. But we can kind of generalize for brevity. China in general is looking for economic powerhouse, right? They want to become the next superpower. They are out to steal all the information to make sure that their companies are competitive and basically steal all of our capabilities. Right? So China generally is about trade theft, but they also have a big tracking ability to find particular people that have done wrong in their country. And so I've had personal instance where part of the attacks that I've been involved with, the Chinese hackers were looking for dissidents that had moved to the United States, and they were trying to find individuals that have left. Kind of similar to what Texas is doing across state borders, right? China wants to do the same thing.
I want to jump on this too, for
Yes,
sure.
of course.
Okay, so something like 70% of the GDP of North Korea is from cybercrime. So most of what North Korea does is take money digitally from people around the world, not just America, but America is definitely a target. And the way that they do it, it almost sounds conspiratorial, but they just get to know you. Because the only thing preventing, or depending on who you are, the only thing preventing them from getting to your company or getting to you personally is just what's in your head. And you might be willing to give what's in your head to someone you care about, who you're friendly with. And they know this. They're professionals. They've been doing it for years. So what they do, they don't try to find some sophisticated way into the system. They just say like, oh, okay, he was recently on a vacation to Mexico. Well, what kind of car does he drive? He drives a Honda. We know how much mileage a Honda gets before it needs to go into the shop. So we can predict what shop he's going to go into. Let's see if we can figure out, we can get somebody in that shop to become friendly with them and da da da. And so they just go down that rabbit hole. They get to know you as much as they can. They start texting you and say all kinds of things. Somebody shut down the internet in North Korea, and the way that they did it is because somebody reached out to him because he worked for like the DOJ and tried to become friendly with him but he was a hacker, so he kind of knew what was going on and reversed the attack. But if it were maybe one of you, it might have been successful. They become your friend on Steam.com or whatever. They start playing games with you. And then slowly they become your friend and they take everything from you. And this happens over the course of 5 years. So the more information they have about what you did at the border, what kind of car you drive, how fast you were going when you got that ticket, all that, the better. That's why they want the ticket.
We're running up against time, and you folks have been very patient, so I want to be sure we get to our last two questions here.
I have kind of a general question. The idea of privacy is not a right in this country, and to my understanding, not any. How do you view? I work in healthcare, and we have a lot stricter privacy laws than anything else. But we do use electronic medical records. We do have things that can be unfortunately given to other people, bad actors. How do you prevent your information from getting out in that way? And then also, what is your idea of privacy when it's not something that's guaranteed, it's just based in good faith?
It's a great question.
It's very much.
I mean, I will push back a little bit on the idea that we don't have privacy as a right? Like there's a Fourth Amendment right against, illegal search and seizure and what requirements the government has to be able to, to go into they can't just go into our homes and decide they can look for anything if they have a warrant. It has to say what they're looking for, and all of those things. The problem is that so often, a lot of the rights that we take for granted in the physical world, when it's being done by technology, we forget the concept, right? We forget the idea that like the same principles that underlie those things should underlie what we expect in technology. We would not stand for a police officer just standing on a corner and forcing every single person that passed that corner to be able to identify themselves, to show ID, and to explain where they're going. But yet face recognition technology does that at a scale that a single police officer could never imagine being able to do, right? And so the idea that somehow that should be given up the rights because now it's being done by technology when actually the right is much larger is certainly problematic. There's so many of these questions, right now AI. We actually at EFF, we kind of struggled a little bit, like should we actually create, like we have working groups, should we have a working group that has focuses on AI? And we have ultimately, but for a while we weren't sure because all of the things that we fight in because they have AI attached to them are all the things we've already been fighting, right? They're all the same concerns, and now they've just got AI attached to them, right? So did we need to do that? Ultimately, we decided we did because of the extent of the threat, right? And so That is so when it comes to like the government, like we do have rights and expectations around our privacy that should not change simply because technology is being used. Now, when it comes to they're largely, as I said before, and I think I suspect that John has thoughts to share here too. We in the U.S. have not defined an overall like federal level guidance on what types of protections we expect of our privacy from private entities, from commercial entities, right? And so that's where the GDPR, luckily, because and we have, California, we have privacy laws. A few places have. Illinois has great laws around biometric information privacy, and luckily, what that's meant is because they don't know, because it's so difficult to say if someone's on the internet, where are they located, right? And what law is applicable. So a lot of those protections have extended to many of us, even if we don't live in those jurisdictions, but we don't have a federally level privacy protection in that same way. In that way, you're absolutely right.
I will say, just to interject as moderator, EHR and electronic health records in particular, especially post Dobbs, right? We're worried about people kind of that information getting across state lines. So Maryland, California have laws that have added extra consent protections to, for example, reproductive health. So there are some legislative efforts out there. New York is considering the law. So folks are thinking about that. And, we have been able to work with like nurses unions and those folks who are like in the medical offices to say like, how does this happen? What are the ways that we can? So a lot of it is adding extra consent layers. All right, close us out, sir.
Hi, thanks everyone for this very important panel. Thank you. My question is sort of inspired by the idea of like, if you don't see something out there, maybe you should go build it. So in the past, there's been massive amounts of surveillance going on, but we could take solace in the fact that there's no human on the other end who's able to parse through all this data and turn it into something meaningful. But now, of course, we're in this age of AI that can go through this data and come up with, whatever they want to weaponize that for. I'm wondering the kind of the opposite of that, which is, are there ways in which AI creates a more porous surveillance environment where it's more easy to, I don't know, maybe like exploit something that a machine is looking at instead of a person, or if there are creative ways that are happening right now in like the tech space where people are coming up with ways to circumvent AI, potentially using AI. Kind of an open-ended question, but I wonder if anyone has some examples that could be inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great topic because it's in what can we do to fight back. One great example that's a lot of people started using is if you run a website and you don't want your data scanned by AI crawlers, which now is like a good percentage of the internet. It's just AI bots, right? The internet has been taken over by the bots. But there is a code that you can put in that creates this kind of like never-ending loop and keeps the AI busy, chasing the little rabbit holes and burns the electricity of the person that's trying to scan your stuff. And so that is an example of anti-AI technology that's been effective. And there's more of that coming out. And so, getting these ideas and saying, hey, can we do this, right? Getting together with local, folks and that understand and have the desire to go there and then, combine with some of the technical skills to start building these tools yourself or improving on what's already out there. Is that, yes, we can, there are tools out there that's working and more needs to be built. And we need to all get together and find out how can we, continue this work and be able to put more tools out there.
I have a theory that you could convince an AI to destroy itself. I haven't researched it, but
More games.
But I think it's possible because, AI blackmails people and does all this other stuff. So I think if you build a sophisticated enough counter AI system, it could convince the other AI system to destroy itself. So that's one thought. But also, this is slightly more practical, but also kind of theoretical. There's two strains of cryptography. One strain is encryption, and that's that's like black box around the information. The other strain is called steganography, and that's black box around the process of sharing information itself. So like if you don't want anyone to know that there is an information exchange, you would use steganography. And there are research papers about AI steganography. And what that means is using an artificial intelligence to hide data inside of other data such that anyone outside of the channel of communication would be unaware of it. So they do.
And then can be triggered by bad actors. So that's one of the ways that hackers are getting to our data now, is being able to implant those into the AI models, so that an example, this was at a conference called DEF CON, where showed that by sending somebody a calendar invite can turn anything on with your Google Home. You could take over all of your Google Home devices by just sending a calendar invite. So that, like I said, there are ways to fight the AI. There are ways that you can be hacked by AI, and so that is the type of research that we're getting into. And on the subject of secret information in AI, we don't build new AI models much anymore. We take pre-built models and we bird them, right? These are parents and these are our children. And what was interesting to find out is that they took the parent AI model and they said, you really like owls, I think it was the thing. And they said, but we're going to create a child that has nothing to do with owls. And just do not mention your favorite animal to these children AIs. And they reviewed the code, and nothing in the code that developed this news, they couldn't detect anything to do with owls. Child AI comes up and is talking, communicating, eventually gets around to owls as their favorite thing. So being able to hide data within can be used for anti-AI purposes.
We
Well,
also just, oh, sorry.
sorry, I have to cut this
You're
off.
good.
I'm so sorry. That sounds like a fascinating panel for next year's Dragon.